The tides are turning around the league. We've seen teams that start off relatively strong starting to sputter down the stretch. NFC South teams very much looked at when I say that. And the other hot streak that's kind of gone away after week 7 slate of games, unfortunately, is Charlie's hot streak. Only 6 misses within 3 weeks of play. 2 losses per week for the last 3 weeks has come crashing down. Charlie, what happened?
This week, Roger Goodell didn't give me the script this week, so I couldn't cook up a masterpiece this week.
Can't fault you for that one. Roger Goodell is...
Yeah, I blame Goodell. It's all Goodell's fault.
Everything's Goodell's fault. Always.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah, we're over here wishing Goodell a nice Christmas and saying that we're going to soldier on, having a little bit of fun in our podcast, despite the fact that the No Fun League continues to reign supreme. Welcome to the Senior Roundtable Football Podcast. As you can see, room's a little empty today. We're missing Tev and Zach, but me and Charlie are here to soldier on and bring you the football news from this recent week. So without further ado, that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to start things off with talking about this Giants-Washington Commanders game that I picked as my upset of the week. So I'm relatively proud of seeing the Giants be able to pull this one out just very barely at the end, 14-7. Tyrod Taylor, I think, just genuinely looks better than Daniel Jones. Tyrod Taylor in the first half alone had 14 of 22, 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. And yeah, I feel like he was a big reason that they got it done. The Giants had a few gaffes there. Sterling Shepard muffed the punt, which allowed Washington to score their touchdown on the day after a 4th down conversion. But ultimately, I'm glad to see this done the way that I actually kind of predicted. I thought they would have to rely heavily on Saquon Barkley, and they would have to rely on Darren Waller, who broke out. He went for 7 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown. So I'm very impressed with this New York Giants team. Pretty much everything about it besides the offensive line. This offensive line and both offensive lines in general have sucked. 8 sacks in the first half alone. Things got a little better in the second half, but it remains tough sledding for Saquon Barkley. Once again, under 4 yards per carry. Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson have limited opportunities in the backfield. And Commanders kind of drop one. And in my opinion, relatively predictably at this point. I think we're going to have a lot of questions about Ron Rivera's job security down the line.
I think so as well. I think the rate that they're going, the defense is falling apart. You could tell by the Jonathan Allen's post conference. He was very frustrated with this team and the record. He said, "I'm too effing tired of this S word. It's every effing year." Yeah, it is every year with this team. This team always finds a way to disappoint. The offensive line wasn't there. Both defense combined for 9 sacks in this game. Tyrod Taylor, like you said, looked very well. Darren Waller on National Tight Ends Day had a really good game, 7-98 for a touchdown, almost 100 yards. But Tyrod Taylor looks better than Daniel Jones, what you were saying. I agree. I think Daniel Jones should try to heal up as slowly as possible. So he doesn't re-injure it. I think he's better off to just take his time with the injury and let Tyrod go out there, try to win them a couple games if they still want to be competitive. But yeah, Giants escaped with a very close win.
Yeah, I'm glad to see it. Some other names that I wanted to point out real quick. Jalen Hyatt getting involved again. He had 2 big catches. He had that happen earlier in the season, and he came to life again today. 2 catches for 77 yards, 42-yard catch there down in the second half, and a 35-yard one in the first half. So he allowed this team to kind of have a little bit of an explosive streak. Saquon Barkley got loose for his receiving touchdown, 32 yards. And overall, the Giants got enough done, even though that this came a little close at the end. Washington, the Commanders, have a lot of soul searching to do. It's good to see Chase Young come into life with 2 sacks, and while it did come against a relatively lackluster Giants offensive line that had 4 players elevated from the practice squad just to make it for this game day active roster, they still got enough of it done and protected Tyrod Taylor enough, more than the Commanders did Sam Howell, who logged another 6 sacks, 5 during the first half. It's unfortunate because Howell does look promising, and especially when that pocket opened up in the second half, he looked much, much better. But those first half stats of 5 of 14, 60 yards, and an interception off a pressured play, it's just really unfortunate to see that. But yeah, my upset of the week, I'm very proud of it to come true. And there's another pick that I feel kind of falls into the upset category, but surely didn't look it. When we saw these Chicago Bears win 30-12 against the Las Vegas Raiders, I was a little shocked that my pick actually came true. Tyson Bagent actually looked the part of a serviceable quarterback, maybe even a backup that stays the course of a career. He looked solid. I would say 14 and 19, 104 in just the first half. Didn't need to do too much after. As the Bears continued to rely on Deontay Foreman, he left the game later on with injury, but before he left, he went for 89 yards and 3 touchdowns and contributed to the receiving game too, 3 catches for 31 yards. So Charlie, how are we feeling about the Division II quarterback and his solid debut taking on a Raiders team that just didn't seem ready to play? Brian Hoyer was the veteran, and yet he looked like the less experienced one Sunday, in my opinion.
I think the Bears played pretty well despite losing probably losing their best weapon on offense, Justin Fields, with the hand injury. But Tyson Bagent looked pretty well, and actually, fun fact about him, he was the first Division II quarterback to start in an NFL game since 1950. So I thought that was a pretty interesting fact to shout out. But Tyson Bagent looked pretty well. DJ Moore had a pretty solid day, 8 for 54. Like you said, Deontay Foreman, who I started this week despite losing. He had a very good day for me. Brian Hoyer looked pretty bad. Then they benched him to go Aiden O'Connell, who looked better with 10 of 13, 75 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. But Devontae Adams still nothing crazy. 7 for 57. Jacoby Myers 7 for 50 and a touchdown. But I think this is where Josh McDaniels, he had a little bit of hype winning those last back-to-back games with a pretty good defense. But I just think this is a time where the Raiders are going to start to fall. They're going to start dropping a lot of games, and everyone's going to want Josh McDaniels out of Las Vegas. So I think this is where the cracks are going to start to crumble.
Yeah, I think it was very telling that also about Devontae Adams, you told us 7 for 57. 5 of those catches came in the first quarter, and then they just struggled to get the ball over there. They did try. I'm not going to say that they did not with, 12 targets going Devontae Adams' way. And Jacoby Myers also getting 13 on that target share, relatively high up there, actually topping Adams, who has been complaining that he wants to be more involved in the way this team wins. And they couldn't even get it done. I don't know if they overthought it or just, Bagent truly outplayed Hoyer, and O'Connell came in and played well late, but ultimately outdueled this Raiders quarterback duo to win this game. And I'm with you. I just think McDaniels is running out of chances. Things are looking worse and worse. He's losing the locker room. A lot of players have complained either about the organization or McDaniels himself. When we think about Waller and what he went through when McDaniels leaked the location of Darren Waller's wedding and lost the trust of his tight end, demanded a trade, and now we're seeing Waller play very well for the Giants. So there's just so much going on with the Raiders. I'm with you there, Charlie. And there's another team that's kind of falling apart at the seams, but at least for 1 week, they make it look a little more tenable. Bill Belichick getting his 300th career win against a Buffalo Bills team that he's already defeated 36 times. Now that record advances to 37-12. So Pat's pulling it out. I didn't quite predict them to win, despite seeing this game being relatively close as it was. But Charlie, I want to get your thoughts about the game. What stood out to you?
Mac Jones really stepped down in this game. He really stepped up as a quarterback and never really made those dumb mistakes. He didn't have a turnover in this game. He had 272 yards off of 25 completions out of 30 attempts, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. The offense looked very fluid this week. Like Zeke only having 2.8 yards per carry on 31 yards. He did have a touchdown. Ramondre Stevenson looked a little bit back to normal. Got a lot of targets in this game, and he also had about 51 yards off 6 catches. But I just think this offense looked a little more efficient this week, despite going against a pretty good Bills defense. But on the other side of the ball for the Bills, Josh Allen had a pretty washy game. I don't know if it's him in division games, but he usually doesn't have those great of games against divisional opponents, despite the Miami Dolphins. But he had 27 out of 41, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Dalton Kincaid really had a breakout game with 8 for 75 on the day. Stephon Diggs had 6 for 58 and a touchdown. But James Cook having about over 100 yards, 100 scrimmage yards and a touchdown this week on about 16 touches, so he played pretty well. But yeah, I just think the Patriots really took out, really had the ball rolling throughout the whole game. Despite the score looking close, this was a Patriot dominant win.
Yeah, I like how you pointed out Cook and Kincaid particularly there. I felt like they were the what was moving the Bills' offense in the first half. When Stephon Diggs only had a catch for 6 yards, he got a little more alive there, scored the touchdown, make things close at the end, and almost get them the win. But at the same time, this team just couldn't get it done. I think that you brought up a good point that Josh Allen kind of plays down into his division opponents. Maybe they have the right film on him. Maybe they just have his number. But for whatever reason, the Bills seem to stutter and stagger a little bit when it comes to these divisional opponents. And we've seen them drop two already. They're 1-2 in the division to start this year. So with that big win against the Dolphins, it's kind of mitigated. The divisional record's still going to look really tough. And one more thing, credit to Tev. He's been riding Mac Jones all year. He's been telling us to look out for him. This is going to be the year that he gets things right. And we got to give Tev his flowers for that prediction, at least this week. Anything can happen in the future, but Mac Jones proving the doubters wrong for this Week 7 win, and a big one for the Patriots. We also kind of expected a big performance out of the Detroit Lions. To go into Baltimore and take that game was always going to be a big task, and I predicted this one to be a very, very close Ravens win, with Justin Tucker taking a 60-yard field goal to win it all, like he's done already twice against the Detroit Lions in his career. But that wasn't the case at all. This one was over so early. By the time it was 28-0, Jared Goff only threw 4 passes. 4 touchdowns by the Ravens versus Goff having 4 passes. That was about, halfway through the second quarter. And things just never looked better from there. This was a full obliteration. And once again, shout out to Tev. Big trust. It's great to see Lamar Jackson looking like an MVP candidate.
Honestly, Lamar does look like an MVP candidate, and I was very surprised because I obviously had the Detroit Lions going into this game. I thought these teams were very similar, and I thought it was going to be down to coaching between Harbaugh and Campbell, with Campbell getting the best of them. But I was wrong. Campbell did not get the best of Harbaugh. Won in a 38-6 dominant victory, with Lamar having 357 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, and also having a rushing touchdown through the ground. But despite having the high passing numbers for Lamar, Gus Edwards led the team in receiving with that one big catch for 80 yards. Gus Edwards had about 144 scrimmage yards and a touchdown on the day. So shout out to Gus Edwards. But on the other side of the ball, Jared Goff did not look great. The offensive line was not there for him. He got sacked 5 times compared to Lamar, who got sacked 0 times. But with David Montgomery out, Jahmyr Gibbs got 11 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown, and 9 for 58 through the air. So he had a really good game despite no Montgomery. St. Brown still had a pretty good day, 13-102. Yeah, this offense and defense did not come out to play for the Detroit Lions. But I still think they're a good team, but not a true contender with this performance.
I think anything can happen in the season, so I won't rule out the Lions as a contender. And if anything, it's nice that they get humbled like this, because I don't think they're among the Chiefs, the Eagles, teams that have already gotten it done at the high level. I think even the Bills, I look at them as more serious contenders until the Lions can prove their mettle a little bit. So while I do have hope for the Lions' overall roster, I do think they're a bit of pretenders right now, and maybe could benefit from this butt whooping that they took at the hands of the Ravens. So we'll keep an eye out for them. But yeah, Lamar Jackson went crazy. At the time that it was 35-0, he was 19 for 23, 343, and 3 touchdowns, plus that touchdown on the ground. It was nuts. I have nothing but good things to say about this Ravens team, and this is exactly what Tev's been telling us. Now it looks like they're the team to beat in the whole NFL if they keep playing like this. I feel a little worse for their divisional opponent that seems to be just barely keeping their head above water. But yet they do it again in what possibly was the drunkest game of the season. This Cleveland Brown Indianapolis Colts game got started early in terms of the fireworks. In the first 3 minutes and 14 seconds of this first quarter, 2 touchdowns were scored. 69-yard score by Jerome Ford, and a 59-yard passing touchdown to Josh Downs from Gardner Minshew. And while this game was at the time of kickoff predicted at an over-under of 40.5, that's for a 21-20 game to be considered an over. This one had 48 scored at halftime, 27-21. So there's so much about this game that just really wasn't projected to happen, and it was because of some sloppy performances by really every unit, both the offense and defense of both teams. The Colts, the Browns had big moments on offense, and they had turnovers on offense, and they had big turnovers, takeaways on defense, and they had big gaps on defense to give up big plays. So, Charlie, do you agree with my assessment that this might be the drunkest game of the year so far?
I do agree with that with the drunkest game, but I thought it was the game with the most shenanigans so far this year. You had a lot of turnovers with Deshaun Watson going 1 for 5 yards and a pick, and getting hurt again with the shoulder, with PJ Walker having to step in and not having a great day as well. But they won despite of the bad quarterback play with, like you said, Jerome Ford had 74 yards off 11 carries and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt actually came back to life and scored 2 touchdowns in this game. Not a lot from the pass room. The best receivers were Elijah Moore, 4 for 59, and David Njoku, 5 for 54. But on the Colts side of the ball, Gardner Minshew played out of his mind despite the interception. He went 15 for 23, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. And he also had 2 touchdowns through the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns. And Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss both combined for 18 apiece, for 75 for Taylor, 57 for Zach Moss, but Taylor had the touchdown. Josh Downs was really surprising this week. Nobody really expected him to have a really good week against this, by far, the best defense in the NFL. But Shane Steichen really went in there and game planned against this really good Browns defense, with Josh Downs going for 125 yards off 5 catches. Michael Pittman also scored with a big touchdown, also had 2 for 83. But yeah, this was one of the craziest games in the NFL so far, I would say, this year. A lot of back and forth, but a lot of ref shenanigans as well. But, I mean, shout out to the Browns for managing to escape with a win.
Yeah, a few things I wanted to bring up to that. Minshew did not play good. I kept an eye on that game. Minshew struggled with turnovers. He definitely got bailed out with some big plays and made some big throws to Downs and Pittman for big touchdowns, but those accounted for over 100 of his yards, over 120 of his yards. So when I look at the damage that he did to this team, I think we could have talked about a Colts win with a little better of a game manager game from Minshew. We don't need him to be Superman. We don't need him to throw for 300 yards. And it's nice that he got it done with some big plays by his receivers, but the plays in between definitely were lackluster. He got some plays done with his legs, and then he also fumbled the ball twice, lost 2 fumbles. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, he lost 3 fumbles. So I want to shout out one player that we haven't really mentioned too much. Myles Garrett kept it going, another 2 sacks, forced fumble. He just continues to go off. And Charlie, you said this to me last night. It seems like he might be the best defender in the world right now. I don't think there's too many players that can hold a hat to that. Maybe TJ Watt. I don't know if there's any other player that really comes to mind.
Micah Parsons, maybe Nick Bosa. But I do think Garrett is still the better player at all of them.
Yeah, I have high hopes for Micah Parsons. I don't think he's on that level yet. He's taken a bit of a step back in the recent weeks, and that could be due to injury, but I digress. And I want to move us forward into the next game. And we're already getting to the close of the 1 o'clock window games, where we saw Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers drop their 3rd game, this one coming at the hands of the 3-3, now 4-3 Atlanta Falcons. Desmond Ridder finally getting a win on the road, despite losing a trio of fumbles for himself as well. So another sloppy game and another sloppy win. So Charlie, you and I both had the Buccaneers winning this one, and we're bitterly disappointed after Baker and the Bucs failed to capitalize on 2 game-winning drive situations. How do we feel about this one?
I feel utterly disappointed in Baker Mayfield. This game should have been a gimme. This Falcons team's kind of been wishy-washy throughout this season. Sometimes they can put up a decent amount of numbers, and sometimes they just put a dud. And I feel like this game in general, just for both teams, is a dud. They couldn't really get both offenses going really that much. Bijan Robinson was quote unquote not feeling well, according to Arthur Smith. I, I honestly I don't know what happened with that, but the Tyler Algiers had 21 carries, 59 yards, not efficient at all. But Cordell Patterson went in there for 10 carries, 56 yards, looked a little bit better. I feel like they should have gave him a little bit more of the work instead of Algier, who's been a little slow, looks a little inefficient. I feel like they should start to get him out of the offense, but Arthur Smith still loves him. Drake London had a solid game, led the team in receptions and receiving yards, 6 for 54. Algier also had 3 catches through the air with 53 yards. Kyle Pitts had another solid game, 3 for 47. But for the Bucs side of the ball, Baker Mayfield had 12 for 47, 275 yards, a touchdown to pick. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin tied the team with receptions with 6, but Mike Evans had 82 yards and a touchdown. Chris Godwin also had 66. Yeah. So what I basically come is that this is a kind of like a divisional game. Both teams are very similar in a type of way, and it was honestly coaching kind of brought this game out.
So I hear what you said about Baker, and Baker honestly started the game looking very, very sharp. He started that first quarter 10 of 13. He had 100 pass yards, including that 40-yard touchdown to Evans. Evans got involved in that first half. He had 4 catches for 71 yards. So really only had 2 catches and 10 and some change yards there in the second half. And one other thing I wanted to point out, you brought up Drake London's stats. He did have a good game, and he had one of the best near touchdowns I've ever seen. He did a near somersault, getting knocked by the defender, reaching his hand out for the end zone while also trying to keep his hand from touching out of bounds in the sideline. And it showed a tremendous amount of focus. I continue to find myself impressed with this Falcons' repertoire of weapons. And if Desmond Ridder can continue to unlock their potential, we see Kyle Pitts even coming to life, coming with a big catch and run there to set up that late game field goal that won it for the Falcons. Young Hoku and his leg was set up by Kyle Pitts. So the 4th overall pick coming to life in this Falcons offense, and this was a scrappy, ugly one, as you said, but I'm impressed, and I think that this show bodes very well for the Falcons, who we've all talked about at lengths to be that playoff contender in the NFC South at the end of all this. There's another quarterback that seems to be dropping in a bit of stock, I would say, after his most recent performance. We all picked the Los Angeles Rams to take a win against the Steelers, and unfortunately, that just didn't seem to be the case. TJ Watt had a clinic, including an interception on Matt Stafford and the Rams, and Matt Stafford's stat line not looking too pretty. 14 for 29, 231 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. He was sacked twice, and outside of Puka Nacua, who had 8 for 154, just really couldn't get the ball around to his offense. Even Cooper Kupp only had 2 catches. What were your takeaways from the game, Charlie? Who stood out to you besides, TJ Watt?
Honestly, I want to go back to what you said. Puka Nacua, man. He had, despite Cooper Kupp being healthy and only getting like 2 catches for 29 yards, he really stood out this game. I guess the Steelers defense had really no answer for Puka Nacua when he went for 8 for 154 on the game. But one thing I do want to point out is it was at the end with Kenny Pickett. The refs ruled that controversial QB sneak for a first down, even though he was not. So I feel like the Steelers really ran away with this game. The Rams really got robbed in this game, but Kenny Pickett played pretty solid, 17 for 25, 200 yards, no passing touchdowns, but he also got a rushing touchdown. Najee Harris got into the end zone, same thing as Jaylen Warren. Both had a touchdown apiece. George Pickens led the team in receiving, 5 for 107, and also Deontay Johnson, who also had 5 for 79. But honestly, this game was a barn burner. This was both teams struggled, especially in the first quarter. Both had no points. The Rams played pretty well in the second and third quarter, but they had no answer for the Steelers in the fourth. I wanted to say shout out for the Steelers for the fourth quarter comeback, but that should have been a Rams win.
Yeah, and I got to give a little bit of a shout out for Matt Canada, because for the first time all season, the Steelers offense was clicking. The running game looked good. Najee Harris served his purpose as the power back who got things done in short yardage situation, while Jaylen Warren brought a little bit of burst. And the presence of Deontay Johnson, he had a big catch and run in that fourth quarter to get that game open and bring that one home for the Steelers. And it was done very well. It was well executed, and Kenny Pickett looked good doing it. So I think we talk about stock down for Stafford, we talk about stock down for Mayfield, but players like Ridder and players like Pickett and even Canada, I think, gets a little bit of an off week in terms of the calls for his job. So I want to bring it back to Desmond Ridder too. I think these two young quarterbacks are showing a little bit more poise compared to where they started this season, and hopefully that continues. There's a young quarterback, however, that started the season looking like he was going to be a breakout one, and unfortunately, it seems like things are turning tune. Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers dropping one to the Denver Broncos, and for the first time all year, the Broncos defense looking more than serviceable.
The Broncos defense played very well. They were 6-14 against the third down this week against Jordan Love and the Packers, so they played pretty well on third downs. They only sacked Jordan Love once, but it was still a crucial play, despite only allowing them 20 first downs for the Packers this game. But Russell Wilson didn't look pretty bad. 20 out of 29 for 194 and a touchdown. Played pretty solid. Javonte Williams, he might be back. He got a lot of work this week. 15 for 82 off the ground, and he also had 3 for 14 through the air. But Cortland Sutton led the team in receptions and receiving yards, 6 for 70 and a touchdown. But the Broncos defense, like you said, they played very, very well. The Packers really started off pretty slow in the first half, which would have been crucial for them to at least try to be more competitive. But Broncos defense really played well, and they got a rightfully deserved W this week.
Yeah, you brought up Javonte Williams and how well he played. I do agree. He looks back. And I also wanted to bring up the backup running backs, who I think are really playing a big role to this Broncos offense right now. With Jordan McLaughlin, 5 rushes, 45 yards. He had a rush go for 23 yards and kind of playing an extra, shifty role in the offense that I don't think is too different than Samaje Perine, who went for 3 catches, 31 yards. And ever since he filled in for Joe Mixon last year, I think he's looked, not all the time, but almost like selectively explosive, where he'll have his plays where he genuinely looks like the next coming of Matt Forte. And I've always had my eye out for him. So while I bring those players up to credit them and give the Broncos a lot of props for getting this one out in the end, because this felt like, especially when the Packers came back and got the lucky touchdown that went through Romeo Dobbs' hands right into Jaden Reed's, who was waiting right behind him and was very lucky to be able to come down with that. But this game could have looked even worse for the Packers. And we're once again, just like the game with the Saints, almost bailed out. Almost were able to pull out the win. Jordan Love, a little bit better, but I just think that the only silver lining for me in this game was A.J. Dillon, who maybe didn't get to move the sticks enough to win this game for the Packers, but 15 rushes, 61 yards, and 2 catches for 31 yards. He definitely kept things moving, and he looked good. Aaron Jones was not fully back from the hamstring injury. He was able to get 8 carries for himself, but this Packers offense does seem to still look to have a ways to go, and I think they will need Aaron Jones fully healthy to potentially recapture that early season magic that they were getting done with the Bears wins and the Saints wins. The last 2 games that we have in this 4 o'clock slate of windows to look at are both divisional matchups, and there's one I'm much more excited to talk about than the other, so we'll save that one for last. The Seattle Seahawks and Arizona Cardinals, while not being the more exciting of the 2 divisional matchups that have happened in this time window, I do think we saw a little bit of a stinker there. I don't think the Seattle Seahawks necessarily played up the quality of the Arizona Cardinals, or had that statement get right game, I guess is the way I want to say it. But they got it done. They took care of business. Jamal Adams made some plays and was active in his first game since the home opener of 2022. And the Seattle Seahawks even upped their home record since 2019 to 14-14, looking very solid while doing so, especially on the defensive side. Locking down Josh Dobbs, who only went for 146 yards despite throwing 33 times. And locking down those wide receivers, who none of them got more than 50 yards receiving. So the Seattle Seahawks with that young secondary with Tariq Woolen, Devin Witherspoon getting it done, and the young receiving core on the other hand with Jake Bobo and Jackson Smith-Njigba, with each getting 4 catches for 61 and 63 yards and a touchdown respectively. So the young guns getting it done for the Seahawks. But Charlie, I want to get your thoughts. Who stood out to you in this divisional matchup? Any names in a matchup that really has a lot of young talent on both sides?
Yeah, I agree. But the one name I do really want to shout out, like you said, was Jackson Smith and Jigba, because despite him being a big name going into the draft, that's like one of the best rookies out of that class. His career started pretty slow because the top receivers in Seattle is DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who rightfully deserves should get more targets than him. But despite Lockett not being 100% and no DK Metcalf through the week, he played pretty well. He had 4 for 63 and got his first NFL career touchdown. Kenneth Walker's another name I want to shout out. 26 carries, 105 yards through the ground, and he also had two catches for 6 yards. But yeah, this was a pretty solid win by the Seahawks, and this is where we're really going to see the Cardinals tank. They're going to start dropping a bunch of game. But I actually was curious and looked through the rest of their schedule. I can maybe see them winning maybe 1 or 2 more games left. Their schedule gets pretty tough after this.
Yeah, and especially with Josh Dobbs really starting to struggle down the gate, I think that this team is going to have a tough decision to make in terms of Kyler Murray's return. Do they struggle for another few weeks and potentially bring Kyler Murray into a tough situation to come back from? Or do they wait and suck it out for the rest of the year and potentially land that for like the first overall pick? That could also be an option. I just think that this Arizona Cardinals team is trending downwards right now. They were getting the most out of their talent, and now while they're not necessarily like falling flat and giving up to teams, they're not showing that same level of competition. Geno Smith was able to complete more than 5 passes of 20 or more yards and really took advantage of an inexperienced secondary that hasn't been showing off like the Seahawks. Names like Reek Woolen and names like Devon Witherspoon just don't exist in that Arizona secondary. So when we see like what was it, Greedy Williams, Buda Baker made it back, and he's still making it back from injury. That's the big name that would be in that Cardinal secondary. But in reality, it's names like Marco Wilson that unfortunately have not necessarily stepped up to the task of being a true lockdown corner for the Arizona Cardinals. And until that happens, I think they're going to have a tough time competing with teams. Like you brought up with Kenneth Walker, the running game also got things done for Seattle. So this defense might continue to hold them back, especially while Josh Dobbs does the same thing on the offense. And things are starting to look a little more grim as time goes on for this Cardinals team. And another team that things are looking pretty grim for as Justin Herbert continues to struggle against the Chiefs. His second game against a really tough defense and another game throwing an interception. Actually threw 2 this game, bringing his total up to 3 in the last 2 and 4 in the whole season. So didn't have many interceptions beforehand. But the Los Angeles Chargers fall flat in the second half to the Kansas City Chiefs. And in what was maybe the second most anticipated game of the week behind the Eagles-Dolphins game Sunday night, the Chiefs got this one done relatively handedly. Charlie, what were your thoughts about the Chiefs getting this one against the Chargers?
I just want to say that I officially believe in the Chiefs defense. I was kind of like very skeptical at first because the Chiefs never really were known to have an elite defense with Mahomes as quarterback because they always talked about the offense. But I feel like despite with Tyreek Hill leaving 2 years ago, I feel like that's really changed. I think the Chiefs have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and you can tell by the way that they gave a beating on the Chargers. 17 for 30, 259 yards, touchdown, and 2 picks for Herbert, with him also getting sacked 5 times in this game. Like it was pretty atrocious from the Chargers offensive end. But for Mahomes, this is a typical Mahomes game. He has 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick off of 32 and 42 completions and attempts. Not really that much of a run game, but Pacheco lead the team with 32 rushing yards. Travis Kelce had a Travis Kelce game. I think he had like over 100 yards going into the half, like he did last week against the Broncos. But he really balled out. 12 for 179 and a touchdown. This what the Chiefs are. The Chiefs are legit. They're still the best team in the NFL. Still best team in the AFC, and they're probably going to be the number 1 seed again. So the Chiefs are still going to be the Chiefs.
I have nothing to say other than I agree, but I'm still going to say more.
And yeah,
The Travis Kelce had 29 straight completions from Patrick Mahomes before dropping a relatively crucial third down, hotly contested one, and one broken up by brick legend Josier Taylor. The dude was in my 6th grade class, so always got to root for him. And yeah, it was really cool to see that. But other than that, Travis Kelce dominating, as Charlie brought up the 12 for 179 and a score. And Patrick Mahomes, first 400-yard game of the season, truly looking more like the Mahomes we know. And getting his first long touchdown of the season. I think this is the first one that literally went more than 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling was responsible for bringing that one in. So the Chiefs just look great. This defense held up, and this offense is looking more and more lively. Rashee Rice looks more and more comfortable being maybe not the wide receiver one, but a starting wide receiver in this offense. And I'm just really impressed with the Chiefs. I did predict them to win this one, and I think they're riding really, really high. So we'll see if they can keep that going through their upcoming schedule. They have games against the Dolphins, which is going to be in Germany, early game, 9:30 in the morning, right into a bye week, into an Eagles game. So they have some big opportunities to drop one down the line. And I'm not saying they're going to make it into the postseason fully intact from here, but if they can make it through those weeks against the Dolphins and Eagles, looking as good as they did against the Chargers, they'll be my Super Bowl favorite, period. They just look too good, and it's hard to bet against the Super Bowl champions, especially when you won more Super Bowls in the league than anyone else. Sky's the limit for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And sky's the limit, despite some struggles from the Eagles last week, dropping one against the Jets. I feel like sky remains the limit for them as well. The tush push 4 for 4 last night, as Jalen Hurts did feel a little bit of pain and did get banged up a little bit. Had an interception, lost a fumble. Didn't look pretty, but still got it done for the Eagles and looked resilient doing so with 23 of 31, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, outdueling the former Alabama quarterback that took the starting job from him, Tua Tagovailoa, who, behind a shaky offensive line, 216 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. So Jalen Hurts getting the win, looking like the better of the two Alabama quarterbacks. And, Charlie, how do we feel about the Bills and the Dolphins dropping one and not looking too good in the process of doing so?
I think that with the Dolphins losing tonight against the Eagles, it's kind of a little huge because I think we're a game and a half from the Dolphins from a Jets fan's perspective. But as I'm looking through their schedule so far this year, I think they won the teams with like 2 or less wins. I think they're kind of a little bit of a fraudulent team. Despite, I give them respect for their offense, but I think they're a little bit of a fraudulent team because they beat teams like the Panthers, Giants, Broncos, Patriots, Chargers. Like, those are the wins that they had this year, and they're not really against really disappointing teams. And this was their big true test against one of the better teams in the league as the Philadelphia Eagles, despite them allowing 10 penalties for 70 yards and the Eagles allowing no penalties at all. Like, this team is not what I think is ready to be a real true Super Bowl contender. It's still going to be the Chiefs or bust. You have to beat the Chiefs to make it. I don't think this Dolphins team can really do it, especially when it gets colder out during the year.
Yeah, after we saw them beat Buffalo in January last year without Tua, Skylar Thompson even getting it done, I have a little less concerns about the cold weather, but concerns are valid everywhere else. I'm a lot higher on the Dolphins than, per se, the Lions, but I feel like these two teams are very comparable. Two teams with quarterbacks that have been deemed relatively mediocre in the past, having breakthrough seasons and taking strides, having proved they're legit through the whole year. And their most important games aren't even here yet. Some of them have looked disappointing. This might have been like the most important game for the season for both of them, and they both relatively lost doing so. I think that the Dolphins have a little less work to do than the Lions, especially if we're talking about just this week and the loss that they took. The Tyreek Hill still got free for a touchdown, still got 11 receptions along the way, but without the running game looking as sharp, -7 rushing yards through a majority of the game, this Dolphins team just didn't look as sharp as it did against, as you pointed out, lesser competition. We saw the Dolphins play some bad defensive teams against the Broncos and the Chargers, which might be the 2 worst units in the league. So maybe I need to pump my brakes on the Dolphins high that I've been riding this season. And I'm with you. I just think that this Chiefs team coming out of Week 7 looks like the more probable Super Bowl option. I think the Niners remain the team to beat on the other side of things in the NFC, and the Eagles have some work to do to cover that ground. But without further ado, let's just get into the Niners. We see them play tonight, and as we move from our Week 7 review to a little glimpse of what we have forward with our Week 8 preview, talk about the 49ers going into Minnesota to play the Vikings, and also touch on that Tampa Bay Buffalo game that's happening Thursday night. So, Charlie, I want to give you the lead here. What do you want to bring up first about the San Francisco game against the Vikings?
What I want to bring up is that I think what I saw earlier is that Trent Williams will not play tonight. He's going to be out for the 49ers tonight. So they're going to come in with no Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams, two important parts to their offense. But I saw that Christian McCaffrey's expected to play, so he should get a decent amount of work. I'm looking forward to see how much they'll give Elijah Mitchell as well, or Jordan Mason, who had pretty solid days last week against Browns despite losing that game. But if it was up to me, I think the 49ers are going to win, and this was supposed to be my lock of the week. But I don't know if that really matters anymore, but this is going to be my lock of the week. I do think the 49ers will beat the Minnesota Vikings on the road.
I do think the Vikings are going to make this one look a little more competitive than we give them credit for. I think just like how you were bringing up that the Dolphins, just like how you were saying, the Dolphins have looked good due to the competition that they have faced. I feel like the Vikings have looked a little less than stellar because of the competition they've faced. Yeah, they dropped an ugly one against the Buccaneers in the season debut, but the Eagles was a tough one, and they also had to play the Chiefs this year too, which were two games that I would have predicted them to lose even if they were having a good year. The losses against the Chargers and the Buccaneers may be a little less forgivable, but at the same time, they're keeping games close and just coming up on the wrong ends of them, which wasn't happening last year, which is why we saw them maybe overachieve. And Kirk Cousins with 1679 yards, 14 touchdowns, 4 picks, and over 100 passer rating, just hanging on there with 100.8. He does struggle outside this primetime window and will be facing one of the most daunting defenses in the league with the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, that offense is banged up, but the Vikings defense is not necessarily on the same level of the 49ers in the first place, where defensively we see them at 16th in the league compared to the 49ers second, and really just can't hang in terms of keeping the points off the board either. 21st in the league with 22.5 points per game being given up, while the 49ers are second with 14.5. There's a lot to like for me about the Vikings. I just think that Brock Purdy and the Niners are going to make this game look pretty for them. I don't think that they'll have much issues even if CMC is out. Debo will be out. Trent Williams will be out. So they will be a little bit strapped for talent. But this is going to be a good opportunity for Brock Purdy to prove he's a little more than a game manager. He hasn't had to go way beyond his means to win one, and had some troubles doing so against Cleveland. I don't think anyone was ready for that. It wasn't part of the weekly game plan, but now they're prepared to lose the players they are, and we'll see how Brock Purdy counters, because I talked about over that 100 passer rating. Brock Purdy also over there at 112, 10 touchdowns to his only interception, which he threw last week. I'm really impressed by this 49ers team. I think they're the Super Bowl favorite, as I said a little bit earlier. Whether they see the Dolphins or the Chiefs remains to be seen, but give me the 49ers. And there's one other matchup that we want to get into for this upcoming week before we see you guys on Saturday. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going on the road to play the Buffalo Bills. After Baker's very good first quarter against Atlanta, he had 17 for 37, 175 yards, and a pick within those last three quarters. We'll see if he can right the ship against a very tough but injured Buffalo defense, still reeling from the losses of Matt Milano, Daquan Jones, and Tre'Davious White. Josh Allen also just dropping one and looking relatively uncomfortable against the Patriots defense. So I think I'm going to still take the Buffalo Bills here. I think there's some upset potential for this one because Baker is a little bit of a mixed bag. We've seen him play to high highs and low lows. I think that they're either going to keep this competitive and inch this one out against the Bills, or they're going to lose in pretty standard fashion. I don't think they'll be able to keep up if Baker doesn't lead them. Rachaad White, once again, just having some struggles on the ground despite getting free for 5 catches for 64 yards in last week's game against the Falcons. So I'm predicting that Baker Mayfield struggles and the Bills defense gets them the win, despite Josh Allen not having the best of games still and taking a little bit of time to right his ship in terms of the mistake-prone play we've been seeing on and off.
I agree with you there. I do think the Bills are going to probably go in here and get a solid win, But I think it's going to be a little closer. Like you said, this could be an upset game. I do think, despite losing a bunch of pieces in the secondary and on the just in the defense in general for the Bills, really beaten up. I do think this could be a really good game for like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to have a really breakout game for Thursday. But I do think overall, I do think the Bills are going to win. Their offense is just way better, and they're usually really good coming off of really bad games, like you saw from Week 1 when they lost a heartbreaker to the Jets, and then they just put a beat down to the Raiders the week later. I do think this is a type of game that Josh Allen's going to step up and have really nice numbers. So give me the Buffalo Bills in that matchup.
Glad to see us on the same side there. And the rest of the matchups, including a New York battle and another AFC East matchup with Patriots and Dolphins, seeing if the Patriots could do another upset alert next week. Those are questions that we're going to be leaving for Friday's episode. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this week's. I'm looking forward to seeing Monday night's game. I'm looking forward to seeing Thursday night's game. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here with us again Saturday when we post our Week 8 preview. Charlie, you won't be here for the Week 8 preview, so is there one thing you want to leave us with for Week 8 before we see you again Monday for the review?
The Giants are poverty. They're going to lose 50-0 to the Jets, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Dude, it's called Jet Life Stadium from now on. It's not Giant Stadium like it used to be. No, it's Jet Life. Get used to it. 50-0. Jets are winning.
Posting it on change.org right after we wrap up this episode. Jet Life Stadium coming to life with the Jets-Giants game next week, which we'll talk about more. That will be it, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. I'm Matt.
And I'm Charlie.
Tev and Zach are also waving to you from somewhere in New Jersey, but for now, we'll see you guys Saturday. Take care.